Good morning. Today we're going to be reading the final chapter of the story, A Study in Scarlet, a Sherlock Holmes story. This is part 2, chapter 7, and we're not just going to be reading the words, we're going to be stopping and talking about interesting vocabulary words and interesting phrases as we go. And we're doing this live, so if you're watching this with me right now, live, you can ask questions in the chat. What does this mean? What does that mean? That's the whole purpose of this video, to improve your vocabulary, to improve your understanding of phrases and things you otherwise wouldn't encounter in an English book if you're learning English. So if you're an advanced learner of English, this is a great way to improve your understanding of the language. If you don't ask questions, I will just stop sometimes and explain things that I think could be useful to you. Useful words, useful phrases, things that might be helpful for you in your everyday life. And when the chapter is finished, don't go away, because that's just when the fun starts. We will bring in volunteers from Discord, and we will practice some of the vocabulary words that we learned. But the focus will be on accent reduction, intonation, accentuation, all that good stuff, pronunciation. So don't go away if you, when the chapter is finished, if you want to improve your accent. And if you want to be a volunteer, there's a link in the description to the Discord server. The first 2 volunteers, once the video starts, will be the 2 people who we will use. All right, so let's get started with the final chapter of A Study in Scarlet. Pachu's here. Good morning, Pachu. Or good evening for you. All right, just to recap, that means like review the story, review what's happening. In the last chapter, which we read yesterday, the murderer confessed. And it seems like he had a pretty good reason for doing what he did. And he doesn't care about telling the truth, because he has a very bad heart condition and he's supposed to die within a week. So he's being completely honest about what happened. The conclusion. I'm assuming this is the final chapter, since the name of the chapter is the conclusion. Hopefully there's not another chapter in this story. We had all been warned to appear before the magistrates upon the Thursday. So a magistrate is like a judge. And so everybody, the detectives, Sherlock Holmes, Watson, the murderer, everybody had to go see the magistrate, the judge, on Tuesday. But when Thursday came, there was no occasion for our testimony. A testimony is when you are a witness to something, and then you have to tell the story of what you saw, or tell the story of what you happened, and it's very official. If you lie, you could be in very big trouble. So if you're a witness to something, if you see something happen, and then you go to court, and then you have to tell a judge what you saw, that's a testimony. And it's really just saying what you saw, but it's very official, so you have to be honest when you give your testimony. A higher judge had taken the matter in hand, and Jefferson Hope had been summoned before a tribunal where strict justice would be meted out to him. So a tribunal, if you go to court, usually you would just see one judge, but a tribunal, that word tri, that means 3. That's 3 judges. That could be something for something very important, or something very big. They might, instead of having 1 judge, have 3 judges, and that would be a tribunal. Well, I think that it's 3 judges. It's usually 3 judges. Let's get the definition of tribunal. I'm pretty sure that it probably could be more, depending. I don't know, but let's see. Usually 3 people judging is a tribunal. Yeah, I guess it doesn't have to be 3. Actually, it doesn't come from the word 3 at all. It comes from, it's a Latin word, tribunus, tribune, official. It doesn't even, I'm glad I looked it up. It doesn't even have the word three in it. It's just a coincidence. It starts with tri, I guess. But it's more of a group of people instead of one person. So Hope, that's the murderer, had been summoned. A summons is when, summon means come here. So when a judge summons you, that means a judge writes a letter, you must come here to see me. And usually the police will come and take you. There's no choice. When you get a summons, they take you. It's a request for you to come. Summon means come to me. But it's very official. It's something that you can't ignore, or you will be in big trouble. You go to jail. So Hope had been summoned. They requested Hope come to the tribunal. And obviously the police brought him there, where the strict justice would be meted out to him. And on the very night after his capture, the aneurysm burst. Remember, an aneurysm, that's if you have like a vein and then it gets very big and swollen. But his aneurysm burst, so he died. Sorry, his aneurysm is in his heart. Whenever I hear the word aneurysm, I always think brain, because my uncle died of a brain aneurysm. But an aneurysm can also be in your heart, and that's where he had his. And he was found in the morning, stretched upon the floor, in the cell, with a placid smile. Placid means peaceful. So he had a peaceful smile on his face, as though he had been able, in his dying moments, to look back upon a useful life and on a work well done. Gregson and Lestrade will be wild about his death, Holmes remarked as he chatted over the next evening. As we chatted it over the next evening. We've talked a couple of times. We've talked about prepositions and phrasal verbs. So I've spent a lot of time talking to you about the word on. Could very frequently mean continue, no matter what it is. You can just add on to a verb and it means continue. Walk on, continue walking. Talk on, continue talking. Go on, continue going. You can use on in that way. And then the other day, what was the preposition we were talking about? I think it might have been yesterday or the day before. Oh, well, I can't remember. But here we have a different one. We have over something. If you talk something over, or if you talk over something, you discuss it in detail. And you can use over in that way. To look over something means to look at something in detail. What other verbs could we use with over? Chatting over something. See, now there could be a literal, or there could be an abstract meaning of chat over something. Now here they're literally chatting over a dead body. So the dead body is under them and they're having a conversation. But to chat something over could mean to talk about something in great detail. So it means two things here, actually. Oh, actually, no, it's the abstract. They discussed it in detail the next evening. Yeah, they chatted it over the next evening. Where will their grand advertisement be? I don't see that they had very much to do with his capture, I answered. So what they're saying is, how will the two government detectives advertise, look how we caught the murderer? And Watson is saying, but they didn't really, you did. What you do in this world is a matter of no consequence, returned my companion bitterly. The question is, what can you make people believe you have done? Never mind. He continued more brightly after a pause. I would not have missed the investigation for anything. There's been no better case within my recollection. Simple as it was, there were several instructive points about it. Simple, I ejaculated. So Sherlock Holmes is saying, I won't get any credit for discovering the murderer. But that's okay, because I learned several very interesting things, even though this case was very simple. And Watson says, simple? This was not a simple case. This was not a simple mystery. Well, really, it can hardly be described otherwise, said Sherlock Holmes, smiling at my surprise. See that, Pachu? You've got Sherlock Holmes makes a comment. He says, really, it can hardly be described as otherwise. Like, it can't be described as anything but simple, said Sherlock Holmes. And then they give a little bit of extra information about what he's doing, smiling at my surprise. So Sherlock Holmes is surprised that Watson thinks that the case was simple, or the other way around, I guess. And he smiles at that. It's like an adjective. It's like a really big adjective or adverb. The proof of its intrinsic simplicity is that without any help, save a few very ordinary deductions, I was able to lay my hand upon the criminal within 3 days. That is true, said I. I've already explained to you that what is out of the common is usually a guide rather than a hindrance. Hindrance, that's a pretty good word. Maybe that could be a practice word for today. Let me... Hindrance. Hinder means to be an obstacle or to prevent or something like that. So a hindrance is something that prevents you from an obstacle that prevents you from moving forward. And he's saying the strange little things that you see, those are not hindrances. Those are not obstacles. Those do not get in your way. Those are things that help you solve the problem. I've already explained to you. What is out of the common is usually a guide rather than a hindrance in solving a problem of this sort. And the grand thing is to be able to reason backwards. That is a very useful accomplishment, and very easy one, but people do not practice it much. In the everyday affairs of life, it is more useful to reason forwards, and so the other comes to be neglected. There are 50 who can reason synthetically for one who can reason analytically. I confess, said I do not quite follow you. So Holmes is saying for him it's very easy to start with the result and work back to what happened, to reason backwards. So he starts with the result, and then from the result he pieces together what happened. And he says, but most people do the opposite. They try to guess what happened until they get to the result. And Watson doesn't understand what he's explaining, so he says, I don't follow you. I hardly expected that you would. Let me see if I can make it clearer. Most people, if you describe a train of events to them, will tell you what the result would be. They can put the events together in their minds and argue argue from them that something will come to pass. There are few people, however, who, if you told them the result, would be able to evolve from their own inner consciousness what the steps were which led to that result. This power is what I mean when I talk about reasoning backwards or analytically. Ah, I understand, said I. Now this was a case in which you were given the result and had to find everything else for yourself. Now let me endeavor to show you the different steps in my reasoning. To begin at the beginning, I approached the house, as you know, on foot. And with my mind entirely free from all impressions, I naturally began examining the roadway. And there, as I have already explained to you, I saw clearly the marks of a cab, which I ascertained. Ascertain means guess. But let me just get a better definition of that. Ascertain. But I'm going to say that it means guess. find out, make sure about something, verify. I guess my word guess was not such a good one. To find something out, to make sure of something, to determine, to verify, to confirm, discover. It's close. Close enough. I naturally began by examining the roadway. And there, as I've already explained to you, I saw clearly the marks of a cab, which I ascertained, which I figured out, which I guessed, what were the other words? I'm still pushing guess. Which I made sure, which I determined, which I verified, which I confirmed. Must have been there during the night. I satisfied myself that it was a cab and not a private carriage by the narrow gauge of the wheels. The ordinary London growler is considerably less wide than a gentleman's brougham. I wonder how you pronounce that. It must be a type of carriage, like maybe a fancy carriage, but it doesn't really matter too much since people don't use them anymore. This was the first point gained, and then I walked slowly down the garden path, which happened to be composed of clay soil, peculiarly suitable for taking impressions. No doubt it appeared to you to be a mere trampled line of slush, but to my trained eyes, every mark upon its surface had a meaning. All right, first of all, let me show you what clay is. Maybe we can compare between clay and dirt. Clay it's kind of like dirt, but there's some differences. I don't know if I could articulate to you the differences, but so you can see the different kinds of things that you will find on the ground. And clay is the type of dirt where you can make pottery, like cups or vases. It's very strong. It's very firm, which is different from the other kinds. And because when the carriage rode away, in the garden, that the ground happened to be more like clay. So when the carriage left, it made very clear prints it made a very clear impression of the wheel. All right, that was the first thing, but I think there were a couple of other things in this paragraph that were a little bit strange. Let's see. Now I have to fix my camera. You know, 20 years ago, I had a cheap webcam, not very advanced. It never went blurry. And then I buy a webcam that I think could be, I say, oh, get an expensive one because it will work better. And look what it does. Now, how do I don't even see the camera settings here. Oh, here we go. Fix this very quickly. There we go. All right. There was something else here. There was a funny word that I wanted to talk about. Where is it? Oh, slush. That was the word. Okay. So first I'm showing you the dirt, the clay. And if you remember, if you've been following the story, it was raining. So the mixture of the water and the clay, that was something that was helpful in making an impression on the ground for Sherlock Holmes to examine. And then we have the word slush. I wonder if we just type the word slush here, what we'll find. Probably it's the name of a movie or something. Well, it is the name of a treat that people like to have on hot days. So if we look at this picture, this is called a slushy. Well, this particular one is called icy. But these are slushies because this consistency of ice and water like this is slush. And if you don't live in a cold place, then you're probably not familiar with this situation. But especially in the spring, or maybe sometimes even in the fall, there might be a mixture of water and snow, and it's a very horrible, uncomfortable thing to walk in. I grew up walking in this stuff all the time. It's really horrible because it's like water and ice and snow mixed together, and that's slush. So that's the slush on the ground. Here, I don't think there was any snow. I think he's just saying slush, meaning like a mixture of clay and water. But usually when you hear slush, that's what they're talking about. I mean, I think I would just call it mud in this case, but for some reason he calls it slush. There's no branch of detective science which is so important and so much neglected as the art of tracing footsteps. Happily, I've always laid a great stress upon it, and much practice has made it second nature to me. So he's saying that most detectives don't really look at footprints in the ground too much. But Sherlock Holmes has practiced for many years looking at footprints, and it's become second nature to him, which means he doesn't even think about it. It's automatic. He can just follow the footsteps very easily. I saw the heavy footmarks of the constables, but I saw also the track of two men who had first passed through the garden. It was easy to tell that they had been before the others, because in places their marks had been entirely obliterated by others coming upon the top of them. So he's saying he could see the footprints of the police officers, but he could also see the footprints of two other men. And it was obvious that those two other men came first because there were a lot of marks over them. Like a lot of things had happened over them since then. So they weren't as fresh as the police marks. In this way, my second link was formed, which told me that the nocturnal visitors were two in number, one remarkable for his height, as I calculated from the length of his stride. So striding, that's how you walk. And so he could see from the stride, from the distance between the two footsteps, this is a very tall person. And the other fashionably dressed, to judge from the small and elegant impression left by his boots. On entering the house, this last inference was confirmed. My well-booted man lay before me, the tall one, then had done the murder, if murder there was. There was no wound upon the dead man's person, but the agitated expression upon his face assured me that he had foreseen his fate before it came upon him. Men who die from heart disease or any sudden natural cause never by any chance exhibit agitation upon their features. Having sniffed the dead man's lips, I detected a slightly sour smell, and I came to the conclusion that he had poison forced upon him. Again, I argue that it had been forced upon him from the hatred and fear expression upon his face. By the method of exclusion, I had arrived at this result, for no other hypothesis would meet the facts. Do not imagine that this was a very unheard of idea. The forceful administration of poison is by no means a new thing. In criminal annals, the case of Dulski in Odessa and Letellier in Montpellier will occur at once to any toxicologist. Toxicologist is somebody who studies poison. The word toxic means poison, and ologist is someone who studies it. So toxicologist is a studier of poison. And now came the great question as to the reason why. Robbery had not been the object of the murder, for nothing was taken. Was it politics, then, or was it a woman? That was the question which confronted me. I was inclined from the first to the latter supposition. Political assassins are the only too glad to do their work and to fly. Political assassins are only too glad to do their work and to fly. So he's saying if it had been political, probably it would be murder and then run. So let's see where this goes. This murder had, on the contrary, been done most deliberately, and the perpetrator had left his tracks all over the room, showing that he had been there all the time. So he didn't think that it was political because it seems like the murderer stayed there for a long time. If it were political, boom and go. When the inscription was discovered upon the wall, I was more inclined than ever to my opinion. The thing was too evidently a blind. When the ring was found, however, it settled the question. Clearly, the murderer had used it to remind his victim of some dead or absent woman. It was at this point that I asked Gregson whether he had inquired in his telegram to Cleveland as to any particular point of Mr. Drever's former career, and he answered, do you remember, in the negative. I then proceeded to make a careful examination of the room, which confirmed me in my opinion as to the murderer's height, and furnished me with the additional details of the Trichinopoly cigar and the length of his nails. I had already come to the conclusion, since there were no signs of a struggle, that the blood which covered the floor had burst from the murderer's nose in his excitement. I could perceive that the track of blood coincided with the track in his feet. It is seldom that any man, unless he is very full-blooded, breaks out in this way through emotion. So I hazarded the opinion that the criminal was probably a robust, ruddy-faced man, even proved that I had judged correctly. So if you remember the original murder scene, it was a little bit confusing because there was a dead man, but he wasn't bleeding. There was no blood or anything. There was blood, but it wasn't from the dead man. There was a little trail of blood. And it just so happened that the murderer, he's got a heart problem. And when he gets excited, I guess his nose bleeds. So there were little drops of blood on the floor. And Sherlock Holmes realized it was from a nosebleed because it followed his steps. Having left the house, I proceeded to do what Gregson had neglected. I telegraphed to the head of the police at Cleveland, limiting my inquiry to the circumstances connected with the marriage of Enoch Drever. The answer was conclusive. It told me that Drever had already applied for the protection of the law against an old rival in love named Jefferson Hope, and in this same Hope was at present in Europe. And I knew that I had held the clue to the mystery in my hand, and all that remained was to secure the murderer. I had already determined in my mind that the man who had walked into the house with Drever was none other I'm missing something. Was none other than the man, who had driven the cab. The marks on the road showed me that the horse had wandered on its way, which would have been impossible had there been anyone in charge of it. Where then could the driver be, unless he were inside the house? Again, it is absurd to suppose that any sane man would carry out a deliberate crime under the very eyes, as it were, of a third person, who is sure to betray him. Lastly, supposing one man had wished to dog another through London. So that means to hunt. To dog someone means to hunt someone. It's not very common in contemporary English, so I wouldn't try to use it. But that's what it means, to hunt them, to go after them. What better means could he adopt than to turn cab driver? All these considerations led me to the irresistible conclusion that Jefferson Hope was to be found among the Jarvies of the metropolis. I guess Jarvie means cab driver. But let's see. I've never heard that before. I bet they probably don't even use that anymore. Maybe they do. Let's see. A driver of a horse-drawn carriage, especially a jaunting car in Ireland or Britain. Okay, so it isn't something that you would see anymore. Because it's specifically for someone who drives a horse and carriage. If he had been one there, if he had one there, if he had been one there, what? If he had been one, there was no reason to believe that he had ceased to be. That doesn't make any sense. If he had been one there, if he had... No, I don't know. That's maybe there's something wrong with that. If he had been one there, there was no reason to believe that he had ceased to be. Oh, if he had been if he had been one of the cab drivers, there's no reason to believe that he would stop. So Sherlock Holmes is saying, okay, I know that this guy Jefferson Hope is hunting, he's dogging this other guy, Drever. And I think the best, if he were hunting this man, the best thing he could be is a cab driver, going all over the city. And then Sherlock was saying, well, if he had been a cab driver, if he took a job as a cab driver to find this other man, probably he continued working in that way. He probably didn't quit. He's probably still a cab driver. If he had been one there, if he had been one, comma, this is why commas could be important. If he had been one, comma, there was no reason to believe that he had ceased to be, that he stopped being a cab driver. On the contrary, from his point of view, any sudden chance would be likely to draw attention to himself. So he actually, if he quit his job right after the murder, that would put a lot of attention on him. So it would be unwise to stop working as a cab driver suddenly. He would probably, for a time at least, continue to perform his duties. There was no reason to suppose that he was going under an assumed name. Why should he change his name in a country where no one knew his original name? I therefore organized my Street Arab Detective Corps. That's the Baker Street Irregulars. I don't know why he says Arab, though. They're not Arabs. I guess maybe that's some slang term from the 19th century that I'm not aware of. But they're just some street boys, some boys who live in the street, and they're like his little eyes and ears all over the city. They're like his little soldiers. So he employed his little soldiers and sent them systematically to every cab proprietor in London until they ferret out. Ferret out means to find with some difficulty, with some work. It takes a lot of work to find something. But maybe that's not such a good definition. Let's try ChatGPT. To search for and find something hidden. Okay, I guess it was a pretty good definition. until they ferreted out the man that I wanted. How well they succeeded and how quickly I took advantage of it are still fresh in your recollection. The murder of Stangerson was an incident which was entirely unexpected, but which could hardly in any case have been prevented, though it, as you know, I came into possession of the pills, the existence of which I had already surmised. You see, the whole thing is a chain of logical sequences, without a break or a flaw. It's wonderful, I cried. Your merits should be publicly recognized. You should publish an account of the case. If you won't, I will for you. You may do what you like, Doctor, he answered. See here, he continued, handing the paper over to me. Look at this. It was the Echo for the day. So that must be the name of a newspaper, the Echo. And the paragraph to which he pointed was devoted to the case in question. The public, it said, have lost a sensational treat through the sudden death of the man Hope, who was suspected of the murder of Mr. Enoch Drever and of Mr. Joseph Stangerson. The details of the case will probably never be known now, though we are informed upon good authority that the crime was the result of an old-standing and romantic feud. A feud is a fight or disagreement in which love and Mormonism bore a part. It seems to me that the victims belonged in their younger days to the Latter-day Saints. So that's the religious group that they're referring to, the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints. Hope, the deceased prisoner, hails from Salt Lake City. Hail is a... we were talking about the word hail the other day, hailing a cab. Taxi, that's hailing a taxi, hailing a cab. But hail can also mean come from, like where do you come from? Where do you hail from? I hail from Chicago. It's very old-fashioned. It's not very common to use that anymore in that way. So I wouldn't recommend using it, but that's how they're using it here. So let's see. The deceased prisoner hails from Salt Lake City. That just means he comes from Salt Lake City. If the case has had no other effect, it at least brings out to the most striking manner the efficiency of our detective police force, and will serve as a lesson to all foreigners that they will do wisely to settle their feuds at home and not carry them on to British soil. It is an open secret that the credit of his smart capture belongs entirely to well-known Scotland Yard officials, Mr. Lestrade and Gregson. That Messrs is kind of an old-fashioned, it's just plural for Mr., but wait a minute. I'm just seeing how you should pronounce it. Yes, it's the plural form of misters, used to address or refer to two or more men. Let's see. What is the pronunciation? I think it's Messers, but I would just say misters. Yeah, Messers. I don't know. I think I would just say misters instead. I don't think people do that anymore anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. Just if you're reading books from the 19th century. So we'll say Misters Lestrade and Gregson. The man was apprehended, it appears, in the rooms of a certain Mr. Sherlock Holmes, who has himself, as an amateur, shown some talent in the detective line, and who, with such instructors, may hope in time to attain some degree of their skill. It is expected that a testimonial of some sort be presented to the two officers as a fitting recognition of their service. So the newspaper, we're reading a clip from the newspaper, and the newspaper is saying, well, the murder is solved and the two detectives did a fantastic job and they deserve official recognition from the government, and how wonderful they are. Didn't I tell you so when we started? Cried Sherlock Holmes with a laugh. That's the result of our study in Scarlet, to get them a testimonial. So the testimonial would be some kind of recognition, official recognition. Never mind, I answered. I have all the facts in my journal, and the public shall know them. In the meantime, you must make yourself contented by the consciousness of success, like the Roman miser. Then we have a Latin phrase here: Populus me sibilat at mihi plaudo ipse domi simul ac nomus contemplar in arca. No idea what that means. Let's ask ChatGPT. The people hiss at me. So the people don't like me. The people say, "Sss," that's hissing, like a cat, like an angry cat. The people hiss at me, but I applaud myself when I am home alone and gaze at the coins in my chest. So everybody hates me, but I don't care because I'm rich. That's really what it means. Okay. Well, that was the end of chapter 7, the final one. So the next time when we start again, probably tomorrow, we will start the next Sherlock Holmes story, which will be The Sign of Four. That's one of my favorite ones from the TV show. So I wonder how the story will be. All right, so I don't know. I didn't really get much vocabulary from this today, and I didn't realize this was only going to last 45 minutes today. But we have Pachu. Pachu has volunteered to practice today. And I don't really have any exercise to make. So what we'll do, we'll bring in Pachu, and then we'll start talking to Pachu and see what we can come up with. Because I don't have any vocabulary words from this, really. I mean, I found a couple, but that won't take very long. We should practice at least for an hour or something like that. So, okay, let's see if Pachu's around. Maybe. All right. No, Pachu's not here right now. Okay. Well, actually, let me restart Discord. No, Pachu's not even online. He volunteered. Maybe his internet went out. Let's see. Well, that's a little bit of a disappointment. Okay, well, I guess I don't have anything then. I guess, well, maybe we can talk about, let's see. No, I think we better just finish here. All right, I think probably I'll just check my schedule to see if I can do tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow should be okay. So I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll start the Sign of Four. We'll start the Sign of Four tomorrow. Okay? Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for your comments and questions. And I'll see you tomorrow.